Hello guys, and welcome to another video from Igne. I had a request in another video to cover free-to-play Guardian Ants, so that's what we're going to do today. Again, just a disclaimer that what I suggest and what I feel is the best Guardian Ants for free-to-play is by opinion and testing and use myself. It doesn't necessarily, you don't have to agree with my opinion, but this is what I personally use, and this is what I consider to be the better ants in regards to Guardians. Once again, I'll put up the chart that me and Carver made. It's a chart that can help you with what we feel is the best in each class, each slot, what their special skill is when it comes to doing like the cave creatures or in the underground maze, etc., etc. So feel free to pause on that and look over it. We also have it in Discord, and I hope that it helps you, and we'll get right into it. Okay, so before we get into the actual answer, I want to run through the basics of how to effectively use Guardians in the first place. They are the weakest of the three troop types, but they're not meant to be used as an attack force, per se, unless you buy some of the heavy pay-to-win ants that you can buy, like Parata, to be able to make them an attacking force. Their whole purpose is to basically outlive their opponent. As you can see, their defense is a lot higher. Their health is a little bit lower, but their defense is what makes them higher than everything else, essentially. And that's the whole focus of it. They're not really an attacking unit, and their health is also about mid-range. It comes after carriers. So their whole purpose is for survivability. So when you're building in marches, that's something that you really want to look at and keep in mind as far as what's going to be an effective Guardian march. Now, Guardians also have a unique ability to act as almost like another support in your lineup. So if you're running a Guardian shooter, they add an additional support for that defense in that front line, and allows your damage dealers to be able to do more damage to be able to take out the opponent. So a lot of times you'll see people that are running like a Giant Tooth and Wise Berserker and Laffy, and they're running Guardian shooter, and that's because that front line is getting the additional support that they don't have from running something like Giant Tooth Slamarch, but it's still able to get that secondary support. Now, the other interesting thing about Guardians, they're also the one ant that you want to use when you're doing any kind of testing. The reason being is that they cannot crit. They have no crit chance whatsoever. So when you're testing, you get a very solid baseline on what you're testing. Like, for instance, if you're trying to see if the Groundhog has defense that week, you're running something like Golden Sugar with only the Pierce skill unlocked, and running it with Guardians to be able to test and hit, because if that procs and triggers, then it does have defense. Now, we'll get into what I believe is the best ants and lineups, and which ones to kind of avoid it and why. So we'll get right into it. For the front line, it's a lot of the same thing. And again, like I just said, Guardians are not really meant for attack, and as using only free play ants, you're going to be using it mostly for defense and not for actually attacking. So you want to stay away from a lot of the universals that are damage dealing. The only universal that I would say is a good Guardian ant, or can be used for Guardian ant, would be the Giant Tooth. And that's again because it has the extra health. It's able to give a little bit of damage. It's able to disable. It's just an all-around good support ant to have as a Guardian main. The absolute best front line in my opinion, is the Shield Warden. The Shield Warden is amazing. It's what I run. It has the benefit of having some healing, gives you extra health. It reduces the skill damage that is taken by the enemy. So, and again, that goes back to what we were discussing, to where the whole point of a Guardian March is to have it survive. It's not trying to attack, it's not trying to destroy anything. Its whole purpose is survivability. So that's what we're focusing on, what we want. So Shield Warden is by far the best in the front, and it's what I personally run, as you can see. Now we get into your midline and DPS and more survivability, which is where we get into the other ants. But before we do that, let me go ahead and go over the other ants that you could use in the front line, but I personally do not find them to be effective at all. And that would be, one of the first ones would be Guard General. Now, Guard General, where yes, it does have like the increased defense and such, the one thing that it really has the downfall on is the fact that its chance to actually proc is so low that it hardly ever is able to actually do anything. So, and it has a damage reduction and such, but again, it's so low, it's only a 30% chance. So you're essentially just kind of throwing it out there. It doesn't really have any good qualities that makes it extremely effective in the front line. But if you had to, that's where you put it, as the front line. The other one that would potentially be used in the front line, but is not a good ant, is Jet Black, which I was disappointed with, because on paper, Jet Black should be absolutely amazing. But for some reason, it doesn't work. It's kind of exactly like the Predator. It just does not seem to do what it's supposed to do on paper. At some point in time, hopefully they buff that, because Jet Black will be an absolutely insane ant to have in a Guardian March if they ever do that. Okay, now we'll get into your midline and not really DPS, but your support DPS for your marches. One of the absolute best one is the Leaf Devourer. This thing actually does a lot. It procs a lot, and it does actually hit pretty hard, which will help with a little bit of survivability. Because I mean, obviously, if you're killing off some of the troops, then you're not going to be taking as much damage from each round, increasing it. So this is by far the best free-to-play Guardian to have. Now, and I would personally put that in the middle slot, because even though it has the range of 5, so you could put it in the last slot, I put it in the middle slot so it's basically able to start hitting faster while it's being defended by the front line. Now, if we get into the other ones that are quote-unquote damage, there would be like the Black Cancer. I personally don't like Black Cancer at all. And again, it goes right back to the fact that the Black Cancer is designed to be a damage dealer. It doesn't really seem to proc all that much. It doesn't seem to hit all that hard. Some people swear by it. But for me, when I'm building a Guardian March, I'm looking at survivability. And it's not designed for survivability at all. It's a pure attack. It's kind of designed around kind of how Leaf Devourer is, except for it's like its weaker cousin. It just does not seem to have the effect it has. And plus, then you get into the fact that it has a low proc chance at 30% on some of its skills. And going back to the Guard General, another reason why it's not a good ant to use is, again, its proc chance is so low, you really only end up having one skill that's firing per round, and it's not really helping you out at all on that. Now, for the backline, what I personally use is the Mimicry. Mimicry it's finicky. It has it has a good chance to proc, but it's one of those that it's kind of like the Reapmaster. It's when it wants to or it sleeps. But I still put it into the March because when it does proc, it really helps boost the survivability of that line. And of course, it has March speed, which helps because Guardians are so slow when they're marching. And it has the ability to suppress them, which basically cancels their attacks out, so you're able to survive another round. So that's personally what I would put in there. And for free to play, there's not really a lot of options as far as ants that you can use. So it's limited into what information I can give. There's really like one or two good free to play marches, and that's it. Unlike the other types, to where you have options, especially with shooters and carriers, you do have options for free to play to kind of juggle around. Now, getting into the Rock Bandit is absolutely garbage. It doesn't seem to proc. It's also, again, it's kind of focused around trying to be a DPS when Guardians really shouldn't have anything that is based on attack. Unless you have, like I said, unless you're a heavy pay-to-win player, you're not focusing on attack. You're focusing on survivability. So this is an ant that you would probably just not bother to use. If you were forced to use it, you would probably want to be putting it in the front line because its range is extremely low. Which again goes back to the fact that its survivability is low, so that makes it so that it's going to die off rather quickly in a combat situation. And I believe that covers all of the Guardian Ants. Like I said, you kind of want to stay away from the universals like Gold Armor, Bullet Ant, Jack Jumper. All those are focused around DPS, and we're not trying to do DPS with Guardians. So, alright, well, I hope that this video helps you. And if you have any other requests or want me to cover carriers next, I'll be happy to do so. If you have any other video requests about anything in the game, whether it be how I choose march lineups, how I counter other people's marches, I'll be happy to go into that and help. But drop a like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye.